Sunday night. I was up first thing Monday morning watching a hearing. The second hearing in the state of Florida was Monday. The first hearing that we had back, I don't want to get the date wrong, but it's been a couple weeks ago. Towards the end of March, we had our hearing here in Florida. And the only kind of part that the judge got through was the very first part of the case. He denied the motion to stay from the ACC, but he did not get to the motion to dismiss or to kind of rule on discovery. Well, in the other day's second court hearing, he got to the motion to dismiss. And unfortunately, from a Florida State perspective, we didn't get past that motion to dismiss to a motion to discovery because it was granted by the judge. That doesn't mean that the court case is thrown out, nothing like that. It's nothing like in North Carolina when the judge threw out fiduciary duty on Florida State's behalf from the ACC with prejudice. The ACC can never bring that up again. They can never refile, unless they go through some court of appeals. That's not the case here. Basically, what we have is just a 1 month delay. The judge gave Florida State 7 days, not including the weekend, to amend their filing. Specifically the part about personal jurisdiction. And I won't get off too far in the weeds into there, but they have 7 days, like I said, not including the weekend. So they'll have till about next Wednesday to amend their filing. And then they'll give the ACC an additional 20 days to respond to that. That's unless they request additional time. So basically what you just have is, a 30-day delay in the case at minimum. Which could obviously turn into longer. Should Florida State decide not to just adjust that single spot, they have, when they said this in the court, they withhold the right to kind of sharpen everything. They could change all the claims, add the claims. They, in essence, are getting a redo. They're able to go down there and they're filing a whole new lawsuit. So it's very interesting, just kind of a delay. The judge also ordered that mediation at least initiate within 120 days of Monday's hearing. That doesn't mean they have to come to a settlement or anything like that, but some sort of mediation has to at least initiate in that time period. It was going to be 90 days had we got a ruling, had the motion to dismiss not been granted and we got a ruling on discovery. But since we didn't get that ruling on discovery, the judge added another 30 days. So we have 120 days between the FSU and ACC to kind of enter mediation. 120 days. Why is that kind of important? That takes you past that August 15th date when Florida State has to kind of put their name in and withdraw from the conference. So there's all kind of things. We could spend 3 hours talking on this. I don't want to go too long, but that's kind of the basics of where we are in the Florida case. May 2nd, there's a court date for the next one in North Carolina. But yeah, interesting stuff out there.
James, big game James Coleman, Den Media Group, of course, is the place to be for Florida State football coverage. James, I could ask you a specific question, but I don't want to pin you down. I want to let you go with whatever stood out to you most on Monday.
Part for the course, again, I know I don't like knowing what I know about. I'm not a lawyer, but I've been through this. Mediation is actually mandated in the state of Florida anyway before you go to trial. So, the judge didn't really do, he didn't hide anything. In order to go to mediation, you have to continue to prep yourself. So there's still depositions. There's still all kinds of other different things that you kind of go so that you can lay out your case. So the 120 days is basically giving them the time to interview, to depose, get information, continue to get different documents. So again, all we're doing is continue to set the facts. But the one thing that's going to be interesting to note is there is a race to get it done. If mediation gets done in the state of Florida, then that basically cancels out North Carolina. That means you settle. So basically, it's a race to see who gets done first, and people are going to stall and delay. But at the end of the day, I have said this. I don't really see this going to trial because the longer it plays out, and remember, there's still a case in Clemson. There's still another court case in North Carolina and another court case in South Carolina that still has to get done. The longer these drag out, the less likely ESPN is to make a deal. And they need to make that deal before February 2025 in order for that GOR to still be in place. So I think there's going to be a lot of saving face when it's all said and done. So that's kind of just but it was a lot. And I tell you what, man, I tried to listen to it. I was moving my grandmother into her assisted living facility. I had it on in my pocket, but I was falling asleep while I was moving stuff, man. Some of these attorneys, man, are not very entertaining. So
Definitely
they can
wasn't.
use a little bit of seasoning in their voice, so we can because we gotta get through this.
Definitely wasn't an episode of Suits this time. It was a lot more just kind of going through the motions and a lot of legal jargon. And James is absolutely right. It's the race to the courthouse is over. Like he alluded to, it's all about kind of the race to get done now. We're talking to Doug Rohan. Me and James both have a bunch. Danielle Kelly. Who finishes first does matter here. That judgment is going to matter. I think the only thing that stands in the way of mediation, that, as he noted, is mandated in the state of Florida. Generally, you would like to have an order on the discovery and have those depositions and things that he's talking about, to provide the leverage for each side, and particularly for FSU's position. It would really be nice to have some things come out and have that on their side. And I really wonder, and how much of good faith are they going to enter that mediation with if the facts are as they are and everything's still redacted and things haven't come out. But within that 120 days, I'm sure some stuff will come out. And as he noted, there's dates that just keep coming up. I think the main thing take away from this case is that kind of the ability to get this thing done and for Florida State to be in the Big Ten by 2025 has kind of shrunk, or at least the ability to do it cheaply and not have to pay the full amount. So I've said all along that it's going to be 2026 at max, but hoping for 2025 and leaning 2025. There's one main takeaway from this. I'm starting to wonder if maybe it's 2026 and you end up playing that 2025 year, as ESPN does kind of have, 2025 and 2026 kind of sewed up under contract. There's some give and take there.
Well, like James, I've thought for a long, long time that this is going to be settled out of court because there's too much brand reputation at stake on the ESPN side, and there's too much inevitability that Florida State's going to make its way out of this league one way or the other. So once the ACC comes to grips with that, and maybe they already have, that they just want to settle with as much money as possible is their aim, and to make probably in a vendetta, make Florida State look as bad as possible if there's any way that they can do that. So here's one takeaway, and you guys tell me if I'm correct on this. Did the judge, in a sense, say that Florida State was arguing its case and not arguing why we should take the next step within this process of moving this to the next phase? It seemed as though he said kind of, there needs to be a reset here. You're not prepared for what you're supposed to be arguing in a hearing.
I'll be super quick. I've got a real kind of simple way to put how I took it. It really seemed like he was trying to lead Florida State down a path. It seems like on the face of Florida State's argument, hearing them argue their personal, jurisdiction argument, all these, it's all for home games. The ACC is in Florida way more than Florida is in North Carolina. He buys that. He's with them. But his issue is written out in the claims, in the precedents that Florida State noted. It just wasn't in there. They did not have, they did not have the stipulations. They did not provide the precedents to move forward, as he noted. Like, he was trying to tell him, hey, this is kind of the way you need to go with respect to that, long arm of the law statute. And ACC or Florida State's lawyers, as you alluded to, they just weren't prepared to go there. So rather than go down that road and screw themselves over, they kind of just went with what they had and, okay, give us a chance to go redo it. So it's, the way I took it, it's just kind of a, I'm not having the word here, but whether you want to call it semantics or whatever, it's just in the way that their complaint was written up. They need to go in and add a few things, and they were kind of tied by what they put in there.
I mean, George basically put it the same way that I would figure it as well. So I mean, that's why they're gonna. The one thing I did see Doug basically said is when they amend they basically have an opportunity to rewrite the script again once they amend their complaint. So where the ACC did a bunch of amending before they went to court, this go around they actually went, saw what didn't work, and now you kind of go, or where you weren't prepared at, go amend it, and then when you come back to court, you'll have everything that you need to have.
Wonder if this might blow up, as much as the ACC fans are happy about this. James mentioned the case with Clemson, the case in North Carolina with Clemson and Florida State. There was an opportunity where Rush got up there and he said, look, if you guys want to, we will just add that one piece of precedent in there, that one piece of litigation to make this thing work. We'll just adjust personal litigation and we can be back in a week. Well, between the judge, and I forget the exact reason, but it was, no, you need the full 7 days without weekends. The ACC needs their 20 days to respond. There's going to be no ruling on discovery. I believe that was kind of the final straw there for Rush. He said, okay, well then if that's how it is, we've got the right, we can change any of it. So with that case in Clemson, with the 2 cases in North Carolina, Florida State has the ability to go back from scratch, as James said, sharpen all of those arguments. So, really curious to see how it changes. If they just go in there and fix that issue on personal jurisdiction, or if all of a sudden we see a case that's just sharpened down to the hilt and Florida State has all kind of new daggers in there. So very interesting to see, and can't wait for that next date for sure.
Based on our conversation the other day with Tony Siracusa, we brought him on after Monday's hearing. While it seems to be a race to the finish line in regards to in North Carolina federal court versus Florida federal court, that there is a scenario that may not be very likely, it probably isn't, but where they could rule that the ACC won in North Carolina, Florida State won in the state of Florida. Therefore, it's going to federal court and it's going to be at some neutral location. That still is a possibility.
And that still bodes well for Florida State. I mean, because again, because there's going to be Florida State is the only one who really has the reason to continue to push this, and they're going to like the AC. To me, this is why it's crazy. Like you have to have this deal done by February. Like this, and you're really fighting this. Even if you win, you will not win the damn, I can't even think of when the retrial. I mean, excuse me. You may win but the retrial will be pushed into 2025. So like you're going to lose because ESPN has told you got to wrap this up by February, man. That's when and they're not going to extend it. And so they stand to lose everything. That's why I think in all of this is foolish. With the common sense part of it, like you stand to lose everything by trying to force a couple people to stay when you can actually get money and really solidify yourself as competing for that third spot with the Big 12 and when it comes to like the remaining conferences. So let them go. Let them try the SEC. Let them try the Big 10. That would be what my thoughts would be. But at the end of the day, this is a measuring contest. And I don't see a likely outcome where the ACC really wins. Like, okay, you win, but you still don't have anything. Like you won nothing is kind of what it's looking like. And hey, if that's a win, then great. God bless them.
Yeah, I totally agree. In the beginning, we all kind of at length discussed the federal court option with Danielle, with Doug, with everybody, with Chris. Closer and farther we get into this thing, I think the kind of consensus is that that's less and less likely, and that the settlement just happens just with the length of time, what James was just alluding to, just to get through the state court proceedings, to even get into a federal court. By the time you get there, kind of all those dates are going to be passed. We just found out today, our next hearing date, could possibly be after we find out on discovery. It could be on into August and September when that happens in Florida. So that's already past August 15th, already past June 30th. So all you have left is that February date. So I'm inclined that it doesn't happen in federal court, but yeah, it's very interesting to see. And it's one of these things we could sit here and talk about it all day, but at the end of the day, Florida State in Clemson, they're gone. ESPN knows that. I'm in total agreement. So it's like, I've said this before. It goes back to like a guy entering the 5th year or 4th year of his contract with all of his options. They're done. So what are you going to do as the New England Patriots? You going to, get the last year out of this guy, or are you going to trade him and try to get a 2nd-round pick or something like that? That's where ESPN and the ACC are now. Do they want to take this to the wire and risk the whole thing collapsing, or do they want to get some kind of value out of FSU and just end this thing here? So we'll see.
You wonder, and this is the first time I've really thought of it this way. You guys have probably had this discussion at some point, but I haven't. That while all this is going on, you've got the SEC and you've got the Big Ten. Now, of course, they will further evaluate Florida State as a football brand. Not that they need to evaluate them, not that they need to have to be convinced that they're a property that they would want, each one of them. However, they're going to continue to play football. They're going to continue to be coached by a particular coach, most likely. They're going to continue to, nobody stays in exactly the same place. You either progress or you drop back and take steps backward. And it would be interesting to me to know what the Big Ten powers that be, the SEC powers that be. I have a pretty good handle on how they would evaluate Florida State. It's one of the best brands in the sport. There's less to really get a handle on than if we were talking about North Carolina. Then you've got a lot grayer area of, okay, is this a value? Is this a proposition that we want to add or not? Even though they seem to be on the plus side as well. But do you guys have any thoughts about the SEC and the Big Ten and how they probably are just, well, of course, the SEC is somewhat involved by connection to ESPN, but kind of perceiving this whole situation and continuing to evaluate FSU?
I think one of the things that they're really assessing is how interesting and engaging this is to the general public. The big thing is, I think it's going to like everybody thinks that the SEC is going to try to make this as palatable so that because of the relationship with ESPN. But I think the Big Ten, again, is who I've always chosen, is chomping at the bit, because, again, this gives them a cross-country brand, a truly national brand where they can go in and dip in every market. So I just really find it interesting, especially, and it's going to be probably one of the talks of the town during a slow college football off season, like for especially those months of May and June.
Yeah, I think that's the main point. Instead of getting into the weeds of kind of, really looking at it, what it means, I think it's just kind of really obvious that it's the difference in, okay, Pensacola's got great cell service. What is one more 5G tower they're going to do? It might improve it a little bit. That's Florida State to the SEC, but you drop a 5G tower out in the middle of Idaho when there's, no cell service at all. You're adding 3, 4, 500 people that all of a sudden have cell service. That's what you get when you put FSU in the Big Ten. You open that pathway into that southeastern corridor of football, and there's no telling how many people are going to tune in. You obviously pick up the Florida State fan base, but you pick up that whole group of people who hate FSU as well. And you end up with just so many different national matchups that you just would not have outside of Rose Bowls and Sugar Bowls and things like that. Where FSU, man, they've got Alabama on the schedule. They just played LSU 2 years in a row. They play Florida every year. So just kind of what it's worth to the Big Ten, it just seems pretty obvious to me that that's where the value is. ESPN's value, as James mentioned, being that, and you mentioned, they're just kind of being tied into the current banner rights, and there being something they could work out there. But put all my money on the Big Ten and praying that's where we land. And I believe that's the plan. When you look at the medical facilities they're building, working towards AAU status and all those things, it just fits.
It would be fascinating. For as much as I don't like the way college football is going with all the realignment, I would love to reverse to 1985. That's not happening. So it does open up just incredible matchups. We're going to see them this fall with Oklahoma and Texas in the SEC. We're going to see them with Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA in the Big Ten matchups, as George outlined, that we would only see in the postseason. And Florida State, Ohio State, are you kidding me? Florida State, Michigan, Penn State, USC.
I forget about Penn State all the time when I'm naming all these teams. Like it's pretty ridiculous. Big
Yeah.
Ten they weren't too far in edging up there close to the SEC as it was. You bring in all these extra powers and you add a Florida State, it would be very interesting. Also, we saw some numbers that came out, and I think Tony Altimore had said that they were old. But regardless, when you look at how close Florida State and UF are with kind of the money they bring in and what they're able to do, and obviously Florida State being kind of ahead of them on the field right now. Once you add that, whether it be the SEC or the Big Ten to Florida State's name, it's going to be real fun to see how the kind of power shifts in state there. It's going to be a lot of fun.